What's up, folks? Live from the NBA Summer League, it's Jonathan Von Tobel, concourse of the Thomas & Mack Center, and somebody who was nice enough to give us some time today, Matt Moore, NBA writer for the Action Network. You can follow him on Twitter at HP Basketball. A lot of other podcasts, too, for the Action Network. Locked on NBA, Locked on Nuggets. Did I cover everything?
I think so.
All right, cool. So I wanted to ask you, so I've gotten to work with you a little bit more this year. We did a lot of the NBA bet streams and whatnot, so it's been cool to get you to know you professionally. I don't know you very well personally. So I wanted to ask you, a big Vegas guy? Like, do you explore the amenities out here in our fair city? What's your trips like to Las Vegas?
Food. That's the thing I really love to go to, is go over to all the great Asian restaurants that are in town, try and find the best buffets that are worth going to here in
still
Vegas.
Active?
Yeah, they're still active. Find all of the places that are kind of like notable to go to. Like, I'm a big food guy, so that's my excitement when I come here, because I think it's absolutely amazing here.
So yesterday I was doing a little bit more of the networking stuff, and one of the fatal flaws that I didn't realize is a lot of people come out here to watch basketball.
Mm-hmm.
They also come out here to network, and they come here to participate in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like 12:45, and I haven't had dinner yet. It's 12:45 a.m., and I'm like, all right, guys, like, can we wrap this thing up? I'm ready to go. Are you like that? Do you get that crazy? Or is it just like dinner and then maybe
so
some
this is my 15th year doing this.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, and so there were definitely days and early on when that was definitely the case. Now it's like, no, like, let's stay focused. Let's be, because the other thing is, when you're meeting people out here and you want to make a good impression and you're trying to be professional, it's rough when you're like, hi, how are you? I need a second because I'm going to go throw up in this trash can, and then I'll be right back, and we can have a good conversation about ball. So it's kind of tough. So I try and be a little bit more restrained. You mentioned kind of like everybody comes out here to do it. Players are definitely part of that.
Yes.
Early on in my career, notably out at 3 a.m., and there was a rookie player whose name I will not divulge, who made many, many millions in the NBA, and he was just absolutely hammering the craps tables, just absolutely going to town. It was like nobody else. I didn't have like a whole bunch of people around him. It was just him hanging out at craps table at 3 a.m. throwing the dice.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's you see a lot of that cool stuff, especially when you're wandering around the town late at night. So let's go back to last night. So obviously the nightcap, Victor Wembanyama, and this is where I wanted to start because I'm a Vegas guy, and this is, I always tell people when we talk about it, low key. I actually don't think it's low-key, but it's a good basketball town, right? A lot of good energy out here. UNLV obviously got it started, and then, of course, basketball fans spur from there. Those old Kings and Lakers games that would come out here for preseason, so it's awesome. I got to say, out of all the basketball environments I've been in here in my lifetime, last night was something special. Like, the building was, like, buzzing from the second I got here, like 2:45. The second deck was packed with people trying to watch Victor Wembanyama. So let me ask you just, what was the takeaway, non-basketball? Like, what was your takeaway yesterday? Because it just seemed exciting. There was like Warriors players. I was standing down because I couldn't get a seat. There's Warriors players like coming out before the game, just standing next to us, trying to watch everything. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it was unlike anything that I've ever seen. LaMelo Ball or Alonzo Ball's debut with the Lakers is the only thing that kind of comes close to it, because that was such a big moment because of the Lakers fans and the amount of hype around Lonzo, and obviously he was such a highly considered prospect coming out of high school and all the mixtapes. But Wemby's like a whole other deal, where you got people taking pictures of him just hanging out in the back. Like, there's such a buzz about him, and it shows you it's simultaneously a moment because of Wembanyama, but it's also about like what this event has become, because this event has become, somebody described it yesterday, I thought it was a great comparison, is like Comic-Con for basketball. And like, that's really what it is, where you have like these moments and everyone's anticipating the individual moments, and everybody wants to be in the building and say that they were there for, my big takeaway is gonna be like, I saw Scoot Henderson and Amen Thompson's first game. Like, that's my big takeaway from yesterday, is like, I was in the building for that. And you want to be able to say that you saw them right when they were first making their first NBA appearance, even if it's not in a regulation game.
So what was your big takeaway? Because I think a lot of people, obviously, they're going to focus on two things, I think, and you saw it on social media a little bit. 2 of 13 and the Kai Jones dunk. And that's because we're negative people. Like, that's all we want to focus on for the most part. But what was your takeaway basketball-wise when you watched Vic?
I think a lot of this is he is not a player, I think, that is built right now, especially considering how exhausted he is coming off of the Euro season. For him to come in and just be like, I'm going to take the ball and I'm going to ISO and I'm going to dominate. And he doesn't have that skill set right now, in part because he doesn't have the size. Even with his handle, like, one thing that's really important is these teams don't practice together, but players are smart enough at this level to know, like, hey, they got nobody else. We should probably set some bodies at Victor Wembanyama. And so the Hornets were like sending triples at him consistently to be like, we're not going to be the team that he shows off against. And I'm sure the NBA would be like, can we just play a little bit one-on-one? Can we just do that like a little bit?
Let him do something.
Let him do something. Look, the defensive presence I think is going to be amazing, because he does deter and alter shots just by being in the presence. He had that big block on Brandon Miller. You see a lot of the passing. He's a high IQ player, so it's great that he goes to San Antonio. He'll look better with an NBA roster, even with the Spurs. Like, Could have used Trey Jones last night. Could have used like an actual NBA season point guard. He's going to need to roll stuff out in sets, but even then, the size stuff is going to be an issue. Like, he is going to be slight. There's people that are like, why isn't he taking hook shots? I'm like, he's not a center. He's not going to be a center in this league, at least not for the first 6-7 years of his career. You'll see a remarkable change from him from where he is now, 2 years from now, strength and conditioning. The changes are just unbelievable in terms of what they're able to accomplish. It turns out that if you just work out and that's your entire job for 2 years, you wind up getting in pretty good shape. So he'll look a lot better as time goes on. The fundamentals are still there, but he's not built to be a guy that excels in this environment. And he may not be a guy that honestly excels that much in his first season, at least for the first 20 or so games.
Yeah, when I was watching him yesterday, a couple of things that stuck out. So as much as I could have watched of him over the last year, he's a nifty passer.
Yeah.
Like the assists that he had were great. When he's in transition handling the ball and he's finding guys under the basket, that was one of the things, like, you hear and you read, good passer. He's got vision. That was one of the things I didn't realize how high that was in terms of part of his game. He was a really nifty passer last night in the 3-6.
Yeah, he's got there's no black hole kind of sentiment with him. He doesn't have tunnel vision where he wouldn't get the ball and just be like, we're going to go absolutely straight forward. I'm getting to the rim no matter what. A lot of guys here are trying to do that because a lot of guys here are trying to make their name, and a lot of guys here are trying to get paid. So Victor's not in that kind of spot. So Victor, I thought, did a very good job of, anticipating defense, running in the offense. I mean, he mentioned that he was very open about how out of shape he is. Like, he's just not in condition to play these types of minutes at this pace, and that was going to be an issue. But I think when you look at what he's capable of in terms of playing in the flow of an offense, like San Antonio picked him because he was obviously the best prospect, but it's a great fit for him because they're going to accentuate those things about his game, about making the right play, about doing the right things, about being an impact player who wins rather than being a guy that puts up numbers, and that's what makes him kind of interesting, I think, from a betting perspective going forward too.
The other thing that stuck out was, and I think it's part of because I was watching the press conference afterwards, part of, like, he talked about maybe a little bit of lack of energy given the workload that he's had. The post-ups looked like he didn't really have a lot of strength posting guys up and trying to back them down, whether that's the slight build or maybe that's, again, just some fatigue. That was the other thing that stuck out. There were a couple of times where he got a guy and he was like, all right, let me try to back this dude down. And it was like, oh, wait, he's kind of sturdy. I can't just do that to him.
It's kind of funny because it's all kind of related, right?
Yeah.
Where I don't think that's what he wants his game to be, is like deep down post up back ends, and who wants that right now outside of Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. And so his game is much more face-up oriented. It's much more of, his handle is kind of what's exceptional about him, his ability to get to spots where he wants to with his handle. But if they're sending that much help at him, what's the best way to counter that? Well, let's post up, turn the back to him. I can protect the basketball a little bit better. But that feeds into his weakness, which is that strength aspect. And when you got these guys, and that is one of the things that you will see here as far as people ask, like, well, what are you looking for in Summer League? A lot of it is like, look, these guys, there are kiddos here that are just like really raw and fresh. There's also there's men here that have been trying to make it in professional basketball for a long time, and they have those bodies and they have that strength, and you see that impact that they can have on him. So, look, and you say, what's it going to be like when he tries that in the NBA? I don't think he's going to be trying that in the NBA. If he's trying to back down Draymond Green, the coaching staff is going to be all up in his grill. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. It's going to be more about figuring out how to get the necessary spacing around him to make it to where teams can't swarm him the way that the Hornets were.
So you mentioned Scoot Henderson and being in the building for that. What's your takeaway there? I like it when guys come out and you see them in the Summer League. It was like Paolo Banchero last year. And they're like, oh, they're everything we thought they were going to be.
Yeah, immediately after watching the first 5 minutes of Paolo, I immediately went and took a ticket on Rookie of the Year for him. I was like, okay, well, he's going to win, and that's done. And with Scoot Henderson, it's just man, he's a tank. He's a tank, and he's wired the way. His competitiveness is the other thing you have to love about him. He is absolutely trying to collect heads every single time that he gets on the floor. And that shows up. The passing was absolutely phenomenal. His ability to make reads, because when you're an athletic guard that doesn't necessarily have great shooting, that's what such a big component is. Are you able to make not just the basic reads? Are you willing? You better be able to make some complex reads. You better be able to see the floor and be able to make those things happen. Scoot absolutely showed that. Scoot lived up to everything I thought he could be in game one. I thought that Amin Thompson really was a guy that I was like, oh, okay. This kid is going to be way better, I think, immediately than I thought he was going to be right out the gate.
Yep. And with Henderson, actually, both of them, I think Amin Thompson both tweaked a little bit in terms of shoulder, ankle. I didn't get to see Thompson, but when I was watching Wembanyama down on the floor, Scoot Henderson was down there, laughing, talking, didn't have anything on the shoulder, so I think it seems like it's just going to be precautionary. So that's a good thing because it's eerily similar to Shaden Sharp last year. Shaden Sharp comes out. I always kept telling everybody it was one of the more beautiful turnaround baseline jumpers I've seen in summer league, and then he just walks off the court. But ended up playing 80 games for the Portland Trailblazers, so I don't think it's anything to be nervous about. All right, so outside of Denver Nuggets, guys, I'm going to ask you about a couple in the summer league. Who else are you watching? We talked about kind of like the big three. Who else are you looking for here in the summer league?
I want to see Oster today. That's a big one for me, is to be able to get an eye on him. Leonard Miller is making a lot of waves after his performance yesterday. There's all of the buzz in the world about Leonard Miller and about him being potentially a guy that can really wind up being an impact player. A lot of it for me, honestly, is I do want to see guys like Nico Mannion yesterday for the Bucks, who's had a cup of coffee with the Warriors in their gap year. And I thought he was really good. Goes to Europe for a year, is desperate. He's one of those guys that word is out, he wants back in the NBA. And so you see how he approached yesterday with the physicality, the athleticism, and the shooting, and you're like, okay, this is a guy that could actually wind up being a rotation guy. There are players that will pop here in Vegas that aren't on the radar coming in, that all of a sudden at midseason you're like, he's having a really good season for them. Is he wasn't even on roster last year as whoever. And so it's trying to find those guys. I'm always trying to identify who those players are that are going to be guys that are going to make an impact next season that people aren't seeing coming.
So let's talk about your team that you hyper-focus on quite a bit out there in Colorado, the Denver Nuggets, the defending champion Denver Nuggets. By the way, I saw some of the tweets. Are you happy with the coverage? Now you get people who have never watched them before watching highlight tapes and being like, I know all about the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to have people be like, the Nuggets are kind of good. And I'm like, well, they've won 50-plus games every year for the last 5 years. He's won 2 MVPs. Jokic is not bad.
Right.
That's accurate. He won 2 MVPs. That's true. So it's been kind of cool to see that. This Nuggets team is really fascinating. And one of the reasons here that they're really interesting is because this is not just they have some prospects and they're going to play them. These guys are going to play. Yep. They're going to be in the rotation next season for the Denver Nuggets because the front office has decided that that's how they're going to build. Yep. Their veteran bench right now, DeAndre Jordan is not really an every night player or even a most nights player at this point. It's Holiday, who they signed, Justin Holiday, and then it's Reggie Jackson, who they brought back on
big
government on a pretty good deal for him. I thought that was a really good deal for him. And then it's young guys. It's Christian Brown. It's Peyton Watson, who had was athletic yesterday and showed kind of some of the gaps in his game too. And then it's gonna be these rookies. And you got guys like Jalen Pickett, who plays such a different style of basketball, one that fits with Denver so well. It's Julian Strother that didn't shoot well from 3, but I like the way that his form looks, and I love the way that he was able to get into the paint and draw contact. That looked really good. And honestly, it's Hunter Tyson who comes in, and everybody's like, really? Such a reach, but they really believe in these guys. And this is kind of the MO, is that Calvin Booth scouts these guys. He believed in Christian Brown. He believed in Peyton Watson. They both worked out to the degrees that they have, and there's a real confidence that they're going to contribute. This is going to be an extremely veteran team next year trying to defend the title with an extremely young and inexperienced bench, and that makes for a really fascinating dynamic for them.
So one of the guys that sticks out to me, Jalen Pickett, what do you think of him? So he gets a 4-year deal, 3 of them guaranteed. Actually, it was a pretty decent game yesterday as well, I'd assume, because one of the things that I really like and nerd out about, I think the Lakers deserve a lot of credit for it. They low-key have a very good scouting department and can find a lot of guys, unearth them, and develop them. The Nuggets are the same way. A lot of these guys are homegrown, and they develop them. You mentioned a couple of them already. And a guy like Pickett, I feel like, is awesome for them. He's got a really high motor. I think he's got a really good ceiling in terms of a scorer, and if they develop him properly, that's a good bench guy to have.
Yeah, what I loved yesterday was he was making reads that you don't see in summer league. That Bucks Nuggets game was fascinating because typically here it's very disorganized. These guys have about 6 days to practice together. And they're just kind of thrown together. It's a whirlwind.
Hornets look like they met 45 minutes before every game.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they've really never played together. But both the Bucks and the Nuggets looked like they knew what they were doing. There was organization, and a lot of that goes into the guard play and how those guards approach the offense. Pickett was making great reads to the weak side, but he wasn't just passing it to the weak side. He was then saying, he was upset when he was like, let's keep it moving. He kept looking, let's keep it. That's what you want for your Nuggets basketball, is you want that ball to pop, force the help, pop it, and then keep that ball moving, because that's how they generate great looks over and over and over again. And Pickett being that type of floor general with his size, he's got such great control of the game, and that's something you do not see from rookies, even as an older guy. It's one of the reasons I think that they selected both him and Strother as guys that can contribute right away. Pickett showed a lot of what I want to see in a point guard if he's going to try and contribute right away in the NBA.
How much of their tact here, like you said, very young, inexperienced bench, How much is it faith in the way that they've handled things, and how much of it is it like the new CBA and looking at things and being like, hey, look, man, if we're going to have a leg up in the competition, and instead of some of these teams like Phoenix like shelling out a bunch of money, we're going to have to develop guys on the back end for cheap labor. I don't want to call it cheap labor because that has negative connotation. But, yeah, it's like cheap players who can be effective because we don't want to restrict ourselves having to pay a bunch of guys to come play for this team.
The language that we go for is cost control.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
That's how we go, is cost control.
Yeah, cheap labor is not great.
Yeah, but no, like that's the whole thing, though, right? Is the CBA has forced teams into the spot where if you're going to be a top-heavy team with the Nuggets that have $500 million in their starting lineup, if you're going to have that type of a team, you have to fill out the roster with these guys on these kind of cost-controlled contracts that you can use exceptions on because they're your own players and that you can develop and that aren't going to necessarily need to get paid in 2 to 3 years. Like, you have to be able to push that off until you come to a point where you're like, okay, maybe we need to move on from KCP, or maybe, this player is getting too old to be in the rotation, whatever. So these are gambles, because if they don't work out, that bench you're going to see the Nuggets midseason being like, trying to get buyout guys and trying to trade for veteran dudes. So there's risks involved, but it's the same, I think, for most teams across the league, where if you have the type of talent that puts you into range to be a contender, the cost for that is you're going to have to draft well, develop well, and really be committed to that, not just from a hey, we're working with them every day. They're with, we drafted these guys and we believe in them. That's one thing. You got to involve your G League team. You have to get the G League teams involved. You have to commit to, when we have practice days, we're really going to get these guys in and do the work with them. All of the work that goes into the NBA goes unseen. It's an incredible amount. That's what makes them the greatest players in the world. And that process is what teams, you're going to see, I think, organizational strength matter a lot more under this new CBA.
Favorites to win the championship, favorites to win the Western Conference. What derails the Denver Nuggets?
Oh boy, it's very interesting to kind of hear where I'm going to be so fascinated when the win total comes out.
Yeah.
Because I've been on their over consistently. Michael Mullen's gone over every single year of his Nuggets career, but if they had such good injury luck last year. Like, Jamal missed games because he was recovering from the ACL. Michael Porter Jr. missed games because he needed to be balanced with the back. But if they have injuries, it is these guys now that aren't just like playing in the bench minutes, and if they need to, now they're in bigger roles. Jamal Murray misses time. It's Reggie Jackson playing full time, and Reggie's been a little bit of an awkward fit with the starting lineup at times. So I think that their short-term value, I think, is low. What I do think is that by the deadline, they'll probably look like a really good team again, and they might be a little bit under the radar. My initial kind of layout for them, I think, is probably going to be, I'm looking to take an under, depending on if this number pops 52.5 or higher, which I think it might, and then be ready to buy them at any point. If there's an injury, if Jokic is going to miss a month and the Bucks have to accommodate for that, that's when it's like, all right, let's get in on the champs and trust this team when they're going to be healthy.
It's my favorite thing to do. It just, whenever injuries happen, and, it didn't get there, but it was a good number. Like when Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and James Harden all went down in that stretch, was around like November. I was like, all right, yeah, I'll take 25-1 on this team, because either way, the number's going to come back up and all these guys come back, because we know they are, and eventually it happens. So I love betting futures like that. All right, we'll get you out of here on this then. Obviously, have to ask everybody. The hot topic, of course, Damian Lillard. In talking to some people, I got to hang out with some people from Portland yesterday, and there seems to be like some gaining traction that not only is this going to like drag on a little bit longer than people think. Is there more of a chance than we expect that he's actually like playing his first regular season minute as a Trailblazer?
I think so.
Yeah?
I think so. I think this is, if you're Joe Cronin, nothing else that you will do in your professional career matters more than this.
Right.
And if you get absolutely just housed on this, which everything's working against him, then that's really going to impact things. But if
it's not shipping off Norm Powell and you know what I mean, and Robert Covington for Eric Bledsoe and some second-round picks.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of pressure on all sides here. It's been fascinating just because there's such an active media machine. And that's how it always is in the NBA. It's not exceptional in this case, but I think Dame's agency has done a great job in their job, which is he wants to go to Miami, so they're doing everything they can to apply the necessary pressure to get this deal done and get him to Miami. I think Portland has fewer options in that regard of how to apply reverse pressure, but they also ultimately control the situation because Dame doesn't have a no trade clause, and he is under contract for 4 years, so there's a little bit more of possibility there. The question I think everyone around that I've talked to has asked is just is there going to be a team that is confident enough to be that Masai Ujiri, who took that risk on Kawhi Leonard? Now, got Kawhi for much less because Kawhi was going into expiring year. But is there a team that's just going to be because here's what's really interesting. Nobody's been willing to do that deal yet. But also everyone agrees, Dame is not wired to do a holdout. Dame loves basketball, and he's a professional, and he's a good guy. Everyone believes in that. And so the talk of like, he's going to sit out and he's not going to report to camp and all these type of things, everyone's kind of like, if we get past even the money aspect, we don't think that Dame is kind of wired that way.
Especially if it's like Philly, right? Like Philly's a good example. Of course, that's a team that should call his bluff. Is he really gonna be like, I'm not playing with Joel Embiid? Like, of course he is.
Yeah, and so I think that is there a team that is willing to take that kind of risk? And right now, there's not. And Miami's done an excellent job of narrowing off all options and being like, you're going to have to get this deal done with us. You know, there's talk of floating frameworks of 4-team and 5-team deals. My only thought on that is, like, those deals are so complicated and they fall apart so easily.
Yeah.
An owner changes their mind. Somebody, you know, finds some piece of intel that suggests a medical issue with one of the supporting players. Like a cat manager is like, we absolutely should not do this because of X, Y, or Z. And those things can fall apart. The big answer here is that, look, it could happen tomorrow, but I think if we're putting the probabilities on it, I think there's a good chance that this drags into August, closer to training camp, maybe into training camp, and I wouldn't be surprised if Dame's a Blazer on game 1.
Because that prop, I always tell everybody, the prop is first regular season minute played, right? It's not like team traded too, so that always matters for a lot of people when you're looking at those props. All right, Matt, man, I really appreciate it. I know I kept you a little bit longer, but awesome conversation again. You want to check out Matt's work, Action Network, HP Basketball up on Twitter, Action Network Pod, Locked on NBA, Locked on Nuggets. I love reading your work, listening to everything. You're the man. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.